All right, so we're here to review Mirror Mirror, the fourth episode in the second season of Star Trek, the original series. This particular one, there's there's a transporter malfunction where a number of the officers, including Kirk, McCoy, Uhura, and Scotty, end up getting transported to a parallel universe where what the entire Enterprise crew are tyrannical, brutal, and they have to find a way to make their way back to their universe during this time. So again, I'll open the floor up for just general reactions to the episode, and actually, even if you have any particular talking points you wanted to kick off with,
I do.
go for it.
Since I'm the one here that can actually remember watching this stuff as a kid, I remember both those episodes actually, but I remember this one because even as a kid, I always thought, "Wow, Spock should always have a mustache and goatee. He looked really badass."
Yeah,
The other thing,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just going to say that, yeah, I think even what Kirk and McCoy comment on it later that they preferred Spock with the mustache.
The other thing that I remember from being a kid is you didn't see belly buttons back then. You know that was real taboo. If you watch like I Dream of Jeannie and that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
she never showed her belly button. It was considered way too sexual. And in that Mirror Mirror, you had at least two females, Lieutenant Uhura, and then the chick that was in Captain Kirk's private quarters. You got
Yeah.
to see both their belly buttons, and I remember even as a kid that was a big woo! Look at that moment, you know. I guess
Well, and
kind of like
that's,
seeing ankles back in the 1800s.
yeah, well, I think that that's right. It's probably something that lends a lot of credence to Star Trek's success, actually. It's probably because they broke a lot of ground with a lot of different things. And in fact, I mean, there's
First
a lot of,
generation kids, all
yeah,
that.
there's tons of attractive women throughout all these episodes of Star Trek. And in many cases, right, their uniforms or whatever they're wearing, if they're on other planets and stuff, sometimes can be quite revealing. Well, in specifically to the time period, the '60s and stuff that this was produced in. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that wasn't all that common in that time period. But that's also breaking new ground. I think is one of the big things that Star Trek does. I mean, what Final Frontier? In this case, it's frontier of television and everything and all the stuff that they were able to accomplish.
Well, Star Trek was also unique because uh, you didn't see that much integration
Mm-hmm.
back then. I mean, it was into the 1970s before you started seeing things like Archie Bunker, which brought what's his name, Sammy Davis Jr. and whatnot. And it was in the 70s that you started getting the sitcoms like Good Times and whatnot that actually featured black families. Before that, you didn't see that stuff that much. And here's Star Trek, and they've got Russians for God's sakes, and everyone knew back then that they were all evil Soviets, and they had Asian people, and they had black people, and they had white people. They even had this weird, strange alien Vulcan guy, and yeah, they were really really cutting edge as far as that stuff. When we look back now from this perspective, and it's hard to appreciate how out there that was at that time, how avant-garde, if you will.
Yeah, I would have no idea. I think it'd be interesting actually to hear that if you had YouTube, so to speak, or Twitter or something like that back in the day, to hear what the conversation was amongst the people seeing this
Wow.
type of stuff, right? Yeah, it's really
Yeah, could you
fascinating.
imagine a water cooler talk at a Mississippi factory after the Uhura Captain Kirk kiss
Yeah,
scene
kid
episode?
stuff. Yeah,
You
yeah,
believe they let this shit on in American TV? This
yeah,
country's ruined.
yeah. No, it'd be fascinating. I want to kick off though question because we've talked about this, maybe not even in Star Trek review, well, probably in Star Trek reviews, and I know we've talked about it before in other reviews, but right, there's the race of people, right? So the idea is the Enterprise is trying to work with this planet of pacifists, basically, to get the dilithium crystals, but they're not willing to kill them or anything like that, even though that they could. But the people on the planet are complete pacifists to the point that they're willing to die themselves to be nonviolent, right? And we've talked about this numerous times on the morality and ethics of that, and also kind of how it might relate to current day or even other things. Like I know we talked about it related to what's the way of the leaf in the Wheel of Time. Yeah, you have those folks, but this idea that it is somehow moral and ethical to allow you to be slaughtered, your
people,
wife, your children to be slaughtered. Everybody die because we don't believe in the idea of fighting back for anything.
I just can't identify with it. That's my statement to that. I just can't identify.
Yeah, that's where I mean I can't either, but I can't even bring myself to comprehend how you get to that point.
It is really cool that people are able to do it. Like we talk all the time about the Vulcan. Sorry to interrupt you. We talk all the time about the Vulcan art of this meditation. Well, we're all probably at least generally familiar with the story of the Tibetan monk who lit himself on fire.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the fact that, by all accounts, historical accounts, dude didn't scream, dude didn't yell, dude went into his, Zen, immolated himself, and was calm while doing so. It's just the ability to do something like that and separate yourself. I don't know. It's there, the capacity for it.
Well, the question is like, because maybe there is no answer to it. Maybe it can't be explained, because my question is like, well, what's the end point? What's the goal of this? Because if your idea is to spread this, to have a more peaceful universe, well, if you all die, it can't be spread. So that's not going to work. If the idea is that you want to protect, if you're violent, that brings about violence. Well, that doesn't work, right? Because, well, you're being nonviolent and people will come in and create violence.
Come and be violent. Right. And I just don't understand it from a sheer biological or physiological, I guess biological would be the right word. Just the basic will to survive. Like that's innate, I'm pretty sure, in most living organisms. There's this desire to live. And if something attacks you, why is there no force back?
And that's really hard to get over that drive. But then if you take it the next step further, because I could understand an individual potentially not doing something for themselves, but to then allow it to occur to those around you, including your offspring, right? How does that compute?
Yeah, and how do you purport to love something? How do you assert that you love something so much that you're willing to sacrifice for it, but you're not willing to sacrifice by raising arms against those that assault what you believe in?
It reminds me of Peacemaker. Yeah, I'll get the peace no matter how many men, women, and children I have to kill for it.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
I mean, I have trouble personally identifying with it as well. Like, I can't see myself getting to a position where, if it comes down to it, I wouldn't do everything I could to, protect those around me. But I wonder, I'd like to know more about the civilization itself, because I wonder if, because it seems like it's a commitment to an ideology, right? So it's kind of a surrendering to like the greater ideal. And if it's a matter of passing it on, if they're documenting how they got there, their thought process behind it, and all the justifications they've made along the way to the commitment that this is the right way, then if another civilization comes along and wipes them out, then that's more of just kind of like an underline to the story, or at least if somebody finds the record that they've presumably put all this thought into and shown that they're willing to make that sacrifice, then what they're living for and what they die for has its own integrity and could therefore potentially be picked up later on by somebody willing to make the same sacrifice for the same idea.
Yeah, I can
But
see that because we have stuff like that occurs now, right? We look at historical records of whatever,
It's fair.
and people might pick that up.
But it would be a surrender to this idea. I mean, in full surrender that like, hey, I really hope this works because I think it's the best option. Because if somebody shows up and, you know, especially sitting on, you know, extremely valuable resources.
Well, that's
It's
the
a
funny thing to
dangerous
me,
game.
and it's also it's dangerous to the idea that it's going to be held right. It reminds me of like, cool, you got this. Maybe this has happened in our history, but then you get like the burning of the Library of Alexandria, and so your records are
You
lost.
lose
So
so
it never
much.
actually passes on anything,
Sure.
right? It's like
Yeah.
And there's
everything
also
was for naught.
There's also the martyrdom factor that you're talking about. Like you said, if they have this all the records of how this culture and this ideology was formed, their theology, whatever it is, and that they were willing to die for it to protect that the belief, the teachings of that belief and that culture, then that martyrdom effect of like, okay, well, that's passed down through histories too. So, you know, like you said, maybe somebody at a later date latches onto that, and that martyrdom effect, you know, propels that way of thinking out there into the ether. But I personally think that conquest with swords and steel usually performs better in terms of getting your ideologies across to other cultures.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure, yeah,
historically speaking, for sure.
Yeah, I would
I
be
have
curious to
two
see like
thoughts.
no,
Go ahead.
Oh, I would be curious to see kind of what the influx to monasteries was after the monk set himself ablaze. You know,
Yeah.
did that kind of attract like, okay, so he's really committed.
guy's
Maybe
committed.
He's doing it. This dude's doing it.
See, if I were one of those people who found the recordings of that civilization millennia later, I would say, what a bunch of idiots. And I would use them as an example of what not to do.
Yeah.
Look, children, this is how you become extinct. Don't do
Yeah,
this.
exactly.
And
That would be my
next thought
takeaway.
was, what happens, or could you imagine being the only prick on the planet who's willing to go against that? Right? You're
Yeah.
there with all these pacifists who won't do a damn thing to raise their hands or protect themselves against you. You could do whatever you want if you just decided to be the bad guy. Hey guys, I'm king now, and anyone who disagrees, no, I'm going to kill you.
And that would be interesting, actually. Like Connor brought up, you know, it'd be cool to kind of see a bit more about their society, because maybe without any stimulus, that's why that hasn't happened. But when they're truly faced with the threat of annihilation, you might get the resistance, right? The people who realize, wait a minute, this maybe is not making as much sense as we first thought. Because
Like the people that aren't the priests and the clerics of the civilization.
yeah, or just all the old people, right? I mean, think about how many old people are so willing to go to war and send everybody else to war because, well, I don't have to
Yeah,
fight.
they're
them.
not
It's
young and they
me
don't
that's
get to
dying. I've already lived my life. Like, yeah, it's kind of wild how you can come to that conclusion. You know, don't take away my Social Security because I'm at the point now to need it. Type
Right.
of mentality.
Yeah, fair.
Another thing I thought was kind of cool because it was a direct parallel to current day, and that was when Kirk's over on their ship and everything, and he and Scotty, they're trying to figure out kind of what was going on, and Kirk's using the computer, which is a common thing, but it's very reminiscent of AI right now, right? You can have a conversation with ChatGPT or whatever, right? He's asking, you know, like, hey computer, what are the chances that this thing could happen given the electromagnetic storm? You know, it's using all of its knowledge to spit something out, and then it keeps asking questions. Like, I thought that was really cool for a number of reasons, but it just reminded me of literally how I might use AI in my everyday life, right? I've got a question, I ask it, it gives some answer, I can just, it's a direct communication, right? With all the world's experts all at once.
I think the scariest thing and I'm super stoked you brought that up because we've talked about this before. The fact that if you look at science fiction literature in general, whether it's Detective Comics and Batman or Star Trek and whatnot, literature, especially science fiction, has propelled a lot of the science that we actually see and a lot of the technologies we actually see in our society. And one of the interesting things about his interaction with what is effectively the 1960s version of AI for that show is that there is still a requirement for personal inquiry or extrapolation upon the information that's given, right? Like he's getting very basic feedback, and then he has to interpret, extrapolate upon those things, and come back to where you need to be, where the computer is an assistive function. Whereas now in society, the thing that I've realized, you have all these experts that are 5-minute experts, I call them. I can't tell you how many times on job site you'll be talking about something or something will come up that it's not your milieu, it's not our expertise, whatever. Anybody can get on Google, but you'll have those people that go on, they'll walk away for 10 minutes and come back, and all of a sudden they're an absolute authority on it. It's like, bro, you just went and looked it up. So now instead of being something that can elicit a more inquisitive mindset, it seems that we just prompt for answers and people don't even verify those answers. You know what I mean? It's whatever pops up first in the AI generation. We obviously have what's it called? The bias.
Confirmation bias.
Yes, thank you. Confirmation bias. And we know AI gives us confirmation bias. It's going to pop up what it wants.
Well, and I know Connor and I have talked about this a great deal, actually. And that's one of the great problems, actually, and why it's so silly to me. I recall dealing with this a lot, actually, and I still do. It's the idea that, oh, just because you're young, somehow you must be good with computers, right? It's like, no, you know how to pull up an app. You have no idea how the app works. You have no understanding of the software behind it. You actually are probably worse off than other folks.
Because
and it's
you
the same
implicitly.
Yeah, and it's the same even with the AI, right? If you don't even know the prompt to ask, right? If you wouldn't even know the question to ask, it's not going to be useful to you. And then if you don't know at least some bare minimum basics, again, you're going to take it as confirmation. Whenever I've put in stuff into AI, a basic math problem, and it spit it out wrong.
And it's wrong, yeah.
And then I have to correct, like, no, that was incorrect, right? Or some other type of information that I know for a fact is incorrect, or at least have the critical thinking skills to come to the conclusion that maybe that's not correct, or it's not all that there is.
Yeah,
and I think that that's a problem to this. I think for a lot of folks is, I think we're in a good spot to where kind of we're in that middle ground, with our age at least, of having learned how to critically think, be inquisitive and have some base level knowledge, versus possibly a newer generation that's just going to be entirely reliant on this and not be able to question whether or not the answers they're receiving, the feedback that they're getting is proper, or even how to ask it. Like, that's the thing that's craziest to me, is not even knowing where to start.
Start in terms of your question. Yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing with I'm a first generation World Book kid. I remember if we wanted answers when we were kids, I had to go to Dad's Encyclopedia Britannica or the library or National Geographic. Like, you would have to seek and assume and find your information. And then I'll never forget in 5th grade, I think it was, when they got Encarta World Book on the computers, the computer bank at Mountain View. And that was the coolest shit ever. And, you'd look back on it. For us, the graphics were great, but
and that's the thing too, right? Is knowing where to go.
Yeah,
where to look. I've got a question. How would I go about finding it? And that's what kills me now is people, they can't even. I hate people that have basic questions that Google could answer in 2 seconds. Like, it'd be fine, and instead you're just wasting that. Why are you asking me? Like, look it up. You've got the world at your fingertips. That's also
pisses me over the interviews where they're in the streets and they'll ask people like, you can win, $100 if you answer 10 questions in a minute or something like that. And they're like, the first question will be, what's the capital of Ohio? And they're like, what's Ohio?
Right, not even knowing,
Well, you mean the state? Like, yeah, not the principality, not the province, the state of Ohio. What's the capital? And they'll say some outlandish shit. They'll be like, Sacramento? Oh, my bad, dog. I was thinking California. It's like, oh, Cincinnati. You don't have basic geography for your own country? God forbid if you start asking them to point out countries on a map.
Well, and even if they do have to look at a map sometimes, there's like no need to like store things in a long-term memory. Because I can have this phone and reference it at any time. And
and that's the thing. I mean, I know I'm terrible. Like, my rote memory is not great, but I have a really solid general foundation to know, like, all right, I know it's somewhere in here, and then I can figure out the rest, because I don't got the time to be storing all that shit.
Well, but I think one of the searching aspect is like, there used to be a gap of time between when a question showed up. It's like, hey, I wonder this, and then you kind of had to chew on the idea before you could find the right book or get to the library or whatever that was. And in that time, you start to think about the question. And I think that's where a lot of the critical thinking
That's fair.
development happens. And I mean, you start piecing it together with what information you already have. There's an imagination to it that, I mean, seeing like the new generation of creators, of just like entertainment content, it's all recycled stuff. So like the imagination seems to be dying as well. Not just
for sure,
I think we've seen that in Hollywood over the last decade and a half. It's all just regurgitated garbage. Nobody's
100%.
willing to take a risk.
Sequels,
I mean, how many
prequels,
Smurfs do we have?
Yeah.
There's like 87 bajillion live action Smurfs, 96 Spider-Mans. Oh, and I heard a thing behind the Spider-Man, why that happens. Apparently there's something in the contract that if there's not a
lot of them are, they lose the rights to it.
Every year they lose the rights and it goes back to whoever. I'm like, that's just such garbage.
Well, that's why I like the Fantastic Four, not this most recent one, but the one in 07 or something like that. That's why it was made, was because if they didn't get a movie made within that year or whatever, they were going to lose the rights. Yeah, but kind of getting it back into it a little bit. The only other talking point that I had for this episode that I thought was interesting, I don't know if anybody picked up on it, it had to do with McCoy. And Spock had mentioned, the evil Spock had mentioned that McCoy was this emotional and basically McCoy seemed to be the same in both universes. And Spock seemed to be irritated with him in both universes, right? Because he's too compassionate. He's too empathetic. He's not brutal in either.
Yeah.
He's a doctor who wants to, keep.
He's a healer.
Yeah. I thought that was kind of an interesting take, actually, right? That no matter where he was.
Yeah, well, I think that's cool that given he's the cleric of the group, he's neither, he's not, I guess you could say he has his antagonistic streaks, but I think that only is in so much as to serve him getting his need to provide the services that he provides. Like, for instance, when he goaded Captain Kirk into understanding, like, we can play this game, but if you want to be able to actually survive this wound, you're going to have to go to sickbay, not to the bridge in command.
Right.
If you remember, I can't remember what episode it was, but I think it kind of shows, if we're going to go in D&D terms, he's kind of a legitimately neutral character, if not neutral good.
Yeah, and he's plays an incredibly important role because, right, he's the only one that can sideline the captain.
Yeah.
So kind of having that authority is a bit interesting too. So, because he only uses that. He's only used it a couple of times, I think, throughout all the seasons, right? Even because sometimes he might want to, and he brings it up, but there's no reason for him to medically do it. So he's never abusive of his power, even if he thinks something else should be done. But there are instances where it absolutely is, and he uses that. Anywho, so that was all that I had for it. Were there any other talking points that anybody had, or anything else that stood out for you within this particular episode? I'm curious how that little thing worked in the, it was like the phaser that from Kirk's quarters that could just neutralize people wherever they were on the ship. That was an interesting thing.
I found it odd. I would have thought, just this is me, I was thinking that the ruthless universe, that the real Kirk, as we know them, the real character Kirk and them got sent over during the Ion Storm. I just would have felt that realistically, that the evil Spock especially, and then the one dude, what's his name, Sulu. Yes, excuse me, Sulu. I just feel like they would have noticed something off much sooner, given how opportunistic that society is in terms of making the play. Shatner and all them would have been off footing there. And
they were off footing, but even Spock mentioned that, though, right? It's easier for good humans to become brutal quickly than brutal humans to become good. So the good side in the normal universe, they immediately knew something was off because the brutal people were not able to fit into a good society at all.
Yeah,
it was very easy for good people to become mean very quickly.
Yeah, to be brutal and ruthless. Yeah, that's a very good point too. Yeah, because they did adopt it quickly. It just, and granted, they did make a move on him.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. What stood out to me was that I don't see how that society could have actually lasted and become what they were.
I don't either.
Given assassinations to be able to move up in rank, betrayal. Like, how could you ever actually get something done if you're always looking behind your shoulder, if you can't actually trust people? That actually doesn't seem conducive to that.
And they were in the middle of the same exact type of situation with that same culture when they went across in the ion storm to that alternate universe. So they're in the middle of an actual altercation. Now, granted, it's implied that they're most definitely the superior firepower and whatnot. They can effectively just obliterate this, and that's what they plan to do. But it's still your culture, your society is in the midst of trying to exact and perform some duty, and you're about to murk the captain and shit. Like, what are you doing, bro?
Yeah, a lot of that didn't really compute.
Yeah, it doesn't
with
make
me
sense
as to how they
from
could have
an
gotten
organization structure.
Yeah.
Fair.
Anybody else? All right. Well, I guess catch us on the next one. We've only got a few left. I think that was like the 6th that we've done. So I think we've only got 4 or so left. So we'll catch you on the next review. Thanks for watching.